welcome to another episode of The Quiet Ones. Today we are talking to an anxiety coach from Connecticut named Marla Genova. I met Marla through Instagram and I love the content that she puts out and her messages around dealing with anxiety. So let's get straight to the interview. Today we are talking to Marla Genova. She is an anxiety coach specializing in social anxiety and public speaking anxiety as well. Marla, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Sarah. I found you on Instagram with all your INFJ posts, and that's when I realized that I am also that personality type.
Awesome. I so love meeting INFJs because I don't think I've really ever met one in person, but it's so nice through Instagram that we can connect to so many different INFJs and learn about all the different things that everybody does. So you're an anxiety coach. How did you get into that career?
Well, I had extreme shyness my whole childhood. I had social anxiety, which wasn't really much awareness back then. Started having panic attacks while doing book reports in front of the classroom around the age of 12. Then, big surprise, I was very drawn to psychology and I majored in psychology, undergrad and grad. And I've been working in clinical trials research for the past 20 years in the mental health field. So I was involved in mental health, which was my goal, but I really wanted to have more of a purpose and be able to speak with those that also had social and speaking anxiety. So what I did at that point, like the research part, I had interactions with participants and that was fulfilling, but it was in other areas like substance use and things like that. So I created a support group back in 2006, and I did a very structured cognitive behavioral therapy program with that. And now I do meetup groups, so they're more laid back. So I've been doing them for 13 years total now. And those are my purpose. Everything I've learned, all the people that I've met, it completely fulfills me. And I decided to take it to another level, to become a coach and be able to help others that went through the same struggles that I was having.
That's so amazing, especially that you were able to overcome a lot of it. I was diagnosed maybe 5 years ago with a general anxiety disorder. And I thought that it was just something that everybody felt the same way. And then it was when I was going to a counselor, she was like, no, the way that you feel, that's not normal. Like, not everybody feels like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always nice for me. I don't like to share it with everybody. I guess that's different now that I have a podcast.
Yep.
One of the things that I know is that it's so nice to be able to share it with people and them say, oh, I've dealt with the same thing. So then that way, rather than hiding behind it, it's something that you can talk about and learn how to deal with a lot better.
It's very healing for me and everyone that comes into the group. It's like the secret that they've had to hide for so long and felt so alone. And then they hear everyone else's story. They're amazed by it. And it fulfills me in such a way to see them share and to see them make progress over the years. So I've had some people that started back 10 years ago in 2009 when I started the meetup group, and then they pop in and out. And it's very healing every time.
I'm so excited that you're not too far from Boston, right? You're in New England somewhere?
I'm in Connecticut. Yes, I'm in the Hartford area, so we are very close.
Yeah, that's awesome. I want to go to one of these groups. We're gonna have to connect about that.
Absolutely.
One of the reasons primarily that I wanted to talk to you is because a lot of people message me and make comments on my posts on Instagram about having anxiety, and I feel like it's something that a lot of INFJs deal with on some level. Maybe it's not as bad as some of the things that you and I have dealt with, but there could be people who have it even worse than us. So that's why I wanted to talk about some of these things. So some of the things that really bother me are like making phone calls. I always get so nervous. I have a full-time job during the day, and my boss told me a couple of weeks ago, he's like, hey, can you call this client and ask them, something super simple. And I was like, ooh, let me send him an email. And he's like, why don't you just pick up the phone and call them? I'm like, nah, I'll just send them an email. Like, it'll be okay.
Yep.
So what kind of advice do you have for dealing with especially phone calls?
The more that you do them, the easier that they get. But there's different variations of the phone anxiety because it depends if someone's listening. So when he had asked you to make that call, like if he was standing nearby and listening, I feel like that amps the anxiety up times 10. Even if you're by yourself and there's the voicemail option. I admit I used to do this. I used to listen to it and go back and re-record it. I got too consumed about that. If I had coworkers nearby, luckily I've never worked in a cubicle environment, but I have shared my office with others, and people can hear within distance. Even to order a pizza, which luckily we don't have to use the phone for that anymore.
Right.
Even being at home just with my husband, who knows all about my social anxiety, I go in another room and close the door to order a pizza.
I do that too. And I work in an environment where it is cubicles and offices, and there's people around me all the time. So like if I have to make a phone call, I go into the conference room or I go out to my car. I mean, it's like that level. Like I don't want to talk on the phone when people are listening to me, even if they're doing their own thing and they probably don't even know what's going on. Yeah, and especially if somebody's standing right next to me, it's like, no, I'm not doing that. Like, you're going to have to go away.
Oh, that's the worst. I would kind of scope out people's schedules and see when they were not going to be around me. And then I would plan that chunk of time to make all the phone calls. Because
Right.
I recruit for research studies. So I do have to make a lot of phone calls and ask really personal questions about mental health. So
Right.
I just don't feel comfortable having people hear me. But it has gotten a lot easier over the years. Like once I realized they're really not focusing that much on me, they're doing their own thing, that kind of thing, I was able to get past that quite a bit. But I feel the pain. I know the pain.
Yes. One of the things, so I'm very close to my niece who is almost about 16 years old. She's an INTP. I kind of talk about her a lot, but she's also obsessed with personality types. And so we go back and forth about feeling personalities versus thinking personalities and those types of things. One of the things that we like to laugh about is we don't like to go to places like Chipotle because it feels like there's too much pressure. It feels like when you get up to, where it's your turn, that there's a lot of pressure and you're like on display to be able to say all of the right things and answer all of their questions quickly. And part of her problem is that she has a problem making decisions quickly because she can't do that. But even with me, it's like I rehearse what I'm going to order in my head like consistently until it's my turn. So like I tell her, you can't talk to me while I'm standing in line because I'm trying to, like figure out the right order of what I'm going to say. And then they ask you all of the questions and it comes at you so fast. And I just always feel like, you know what, this is a lot of work just to order lunch. I would much rather go to Panera where you can order it on your phone from your table and they'll bring it to you.
Absolutely. 100% relate to that. For me, I like Subway and going in and, the toppings and whatever you want there. I don't think it's as high pressure though as Chipotle for some reason. With that, yes, I would worry. And especially if, say, I went out with my coworkers at lunch and they were with me, I would get extra nervous because they're going to judge me even more than the stranger next to me. So yeah, I would kind of have to go to the side, analyze the menu, make sure I had my decision fully made. Then I add on this whole thing, like I'm holding up the line. I'm paying, with cash. It's taking me too long to get the cash out and I got to shove it back in my purse really quick without organizing it. I have to run out of that line. Yeah. Or if I have to sign, I used to get nervous that my hands would shake just during a signature. And this also happened at the grocery store. Like I felt all this pressure being in line. Like everyone behind me was really watching me and I was holding them up and they were going to notice my hand shaking and then the cashier was going to notice my hand shaking. That was insanity. But that was, not to age myself, back before everyone was glued to their cell phones at least. So now Nobody's paying attention. Nobody cares. The thing that has worked for me, I'm not sure if it really apply while you're ordering food, but it's like a look around technique to just kind of, instead of focusing on yourself so much, just take a look around and see, what is anyone paying any attention to you? Is anyone listening to your order? Or are they standing there looking like they're really concentrating on their order and they're being
Right.
conspicuous about it? All of it. Yes, all of it.
Yeah.
I think it's very normal for social anxiety and INFJs.
Yeah, for sure. So another thing that is really difficult for me is job interviews. And I think that it's really difficult because first of all, you want to make a good impression, right? Because you're trying to get a new job.
Hmm.
But then it's also, I usually rehearse what I'm going to say, so I have like I I like to think about what they're going to ask me ahead of time and have everything pretty much prepared.
Hmm.
But especially when you're sitting in front of new people, and whether it's a job interview or, a client or whoever it is, when it's somebody that's new, it's 1,000 times worse.
Hmm.
And I know that I've spoken to a lot of people who ask me about job interviews as well, that, it's just something that they have a terrible time dealing with.
I know a couple of people that their absolute number one fear is a job interview over public speaking. People who have social anxiety, the biggest fear is about being judged. And you're going to a job interview to be judged.
Right.
It's extremely anxiety provoking. It's anxiety provoking for anyone who doesn't necessarily have social anxiety or is an INFJ
Right.
because of that judgment factor. The other part too, which could apply, is some of the clients that I work with, they get really, really nervous and then they start going 10 steps ahead. Like, if they are going to offer me the job, and then when would I give my resignation? And then what am I going to do if they ask me to do presentations at the job, at the new job, and then I'll have to quit that job? Like, all this forecasting, way spiraling out of control. Is just to say, like, this is only me going on a job interview. This is just this 1 hour, whatever it may be. And it's one step at a time, instead of trying to go down and predict all of that's going to happen.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of the problem for me too, because I love to think about the future and to plan for the future. So when I get a job interview at a company that I really like, it's like the first thing that I do is start thinking, oh, wouldn't my commute be so much better? And maybe I could have these different options in the future. And, my whole life could take a turn here with this job and it would be so much better. And I start going down that road rather than, okay, they're probably not going to, or they may not hire me, or I have to get past the job interview first. And, those types of things.
I love that you have the positive approach to that. You listed all the benefits, and I'm listing all the worry, what ifs, you know? I do have an example. This is how afraid I was of having to do public speaking at my job. I work in clinical trials, so they're on grants. Grants eventually end within 5 years or so.
Right.
I had known I was going to be leaving one of my jobs, my first job. I've been there for 6 years. I went on a job interview. As I know I'm getting laid off, as I know that this really depends on a lot of things that I do well at this job interview. And this was right before I started my support groups, right in the middle of it. I outright told them that I want to know if there's going to be any presentations, that I have an extreme fear of it, that I'm working on it. And I didn't mention the support groups, but Toastmasters, because I actually had attended a meeting or two at that time. I did not want to be surprised later. And I was willing to risk that job, and that I wanted to get in there so badly. I was willing to risk it. And
Yeah.
they told me, no, there are not presentations. And I was very relieved.
Yeah.
And I did get the job.
That's awesome.
But to take that kind of risk to hide from that kind of fear, it's astounding.
I can totally relate to that too. My day job, I work in marketing and graphic design. And a lot of the jobs that I apply for have a social media element to them. And they'll want people who know how to do videos. And I know how to record videos. I can edit them very professionally and everything. So when I go to job interviews, they'll ask me about videos and I say, yeah, I can be the behind the scenes person. I can write a script. I can do all of the graphics. I can record it. It'll look super professional, but I don't want to be on camera.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And sometimes they're like, oh no, that's okay. We have somebody who does like to be on camera. And other times they're like, oh, and I'm like, yep, I'll walk away from this job because I'm not going to be on camera. And the funny thing is, now that I've started my business, the INFJ Woman, one of the big things that I have to do is record videos and Facebook Lives and things like that. And it's terrifying. I mean, it gets a little bit better once you've recorded a few, but I don't even want to tell you how many takes that I do and how long it takes me to record a 5-minute video. It's a long time.
I can relate, but it's true because when you're aligned with your purpose and you're doing what you want to do in your own business, you're facing the fear of the camera. I was asked to be a guest speaker at 4 different events this year, and that was like my new level, new devil scenario, because it still does make me anxious, not to the same degree. But I'm like, I'm willing to go out there and be a guest speaker. I don't know how many people might show up, 50, I'm not sure how many, and just put myself out there because it's all about my purpose.
Yeah.
So it's amazing what we can overcome when we're focused on our purpose.
Yes. I agree with that 100%. So one of the previous jobs that I had, I worked for a marketing agency that managed race car drivers and sponsors. And part of my job was to meet guests at the racetrack who were like guests of our sponsor. So they were incredibly important to people who gave us a lot of money. And it was my job to talk to them. There's like usually between 25 and 75 of them. And I had to tell them, get them all together in a group and say things like, hey, we're going to walk over here and please don't leave the group and that kind of stuff. That was the worst part of my job for me. Like, I was so terrified of it. And there was so much that I had to do with that job, so many different things that I had to know. But the thing that terrified me the most was standing in front of these people, because every single weekend, and it's 38 weekends out of the year, every weekend it's people that I don't know that I have to talk to. And I know that I talk to a lot of INFJs who have that problem with public speaking. And that's one of the reasons that I was so excited about talking to you, because I was like, we need some advice. We need some tips. How do we get around those things?
I, in a sense, would, for me, relate that to authority figures, more like high stakes in terms for you because of the sponsorships. For me, and many people with social anxiety, there is this big fear of authority figures. And when you break it down, sometimes you switch up the perspective and say, they might be nervous that they're in a group, or they might have what I have and they're hiding it just as well as I am. I mean, you never know what's going on in someone else's mind. And also that they're a normal person. I mean, although they have a title or it's a high stakes situation,
right?
They are people too. And I think that we're so focused in on us and like, how are they looking at us and scrutinizing us, that we make them to be like much more important and on a whole different level that we're at, when they're not doing that at all.
Right.
It's more of a perspective to switch that around.
Yeah.
Not easy, but yeah. I
No.
mean, my first job, I was working with Yale psychiatrists.
Wow.
21 years old, my first job, severe social anxiety, not treated at that point. Oh, yes. Staff meetings. I definitely had a lot with authority figures, but I don't look at it that way as much anymore, fortunately.
Yes. So how is it different from talking to people that you don't know or people at work, as opposed to having anxiety when it comes to your family? Is there a different strategy that you deal with?
Interesting question. At work, I feel like I have a role to play. And with that role comes some boost of confidence somehow. because it's a role that I have to do it. I can't avoid it or hide. In terms of family, do you mean if I'm open with them about the anxiety or?
Probably more like if there's conflict or if you need to stand up to them and say, you know, if you have a problem with setting boundaries or if one of them stepped over your boundaries or something like that.
Okay, I used to have no ability whatsoever to set any boundaries with anybody. It was a big learning process. It came with a lot of the social anxiety work therapy that I did. So I started setting boundaries in terms of if there's a certain topic that keeps getting brought up that I'm not comfortable with. For example, like my dad feuding with his sister, my aunt, for years. And it got to a boiling point. I'm like, if you mention her name one more time, I'm going to hang up. And it worked. Other kinds of situations where, something that I made a life choice about something that's important to me, and it seems like others in the family wouldn't agree with it. I would, after a while, say, look, I've already explained like why I think this way, and this is my life. And if you mention it again, I'm going to walk out of the room or I'm going to hang up. Not easy,
No, for
but
sure.
effective. But effective. Like once I really did implement those and I was taken very seriously, things changed.
Right.
But I still have a very hard time with conflict.
That's something that a lot of INFJs deal with, honestly, because, for us, our role is like the mediator. We're the person who wants to sort everything out and fix everything for everybody. And so it's difficult, especially when we get into a situation where we can't do that, or no matter what we do, it doesn't help.
Exactly. That took a long, long time to learn. I thought I was out to fix the world for the longest time. It was my responsibility to make people get along, or I let go of that a while ago, but it still creeps up. It's a very difficult situation. I would much rather put it in writing than to actually have to say it, is another thing.
Yeah.
I just feel much more comfortable in writing and it's not as intense.
So
But
I also
yeah.
talked to some people, some INFJs who have anxiety about writing and about putting themselves out there, as far as starting their own blog and things like that. Do you have any advice for them?
Again, I think it goes back to the purpose. If they're advocating for something that they think is important or they're sharing their story and they're anxious about it, I think it's completely normal to feel anxious about it. But if it's worthwhile that they're reaching out and want to help someone else, even if it's just one or two people and putting their story out there, it's an enormous accomplishment and it's freeing in a sense.
Yes. When I first started my blog, I'm one of those people who, like, every January 1st, I'm like, okay, I'm going to start a blog. So I have like 6 or 8 blogs that have 2 or 3 posts on them. Because part of it would be I would sit down to write and just be so anxious because I have stories that I feel like I want to tell, but I'm also scared about the judgment that comes with telling them. And then at the same time, once you decide, okay, I'm not worried about the judgment, it's this incredibly personal thing to sit there and write down some of these things, that maybe you don't even discuss with your friends. And sometimes you're not even sure that your parents know about some things. Like, for instance, a lot of my friends don't know that I have social anxiety. I try to hide it from them because I don't want to know their opinion about it. I don't want them to think less of me because of it. So I feel like a lot of people that I've spoken to about writing a blog, and when they read my blog, they say things like, oh, you're so brave, and I'm so glad that you're doing this. And I think, wow, I'm not really brave. Every time I hit publish, I'm terrified. But part of it for me, though, is I learned that I just have to be scared and do it anyway. And once you get that one person who says, oh my God, I'm so glad that you wrote that, I feel the exact same way, it almost changes the whole game.
Completely. It's so rewarding when people are commenting, like, I thought I was the only one, and thank you so much for sharing this. And courage and fear go together in that way
Yeah.
because you're afraid, yet despite that, and you can put the and fear, feeling afraid, and I can also be courageous and share this at the same time.
Yes. I don't think that courage and fear are opposites. I think that courage is being able to be afraid and to do what you want to do anyway.
Exactly. And that's something Brene Brown speaks about in her TED Talks.
I
When I
love
put my story out there, my husband, he's so sweet. He doesn't have social anxiety at all. And I was just doing my support groups about 10 years ago. He purchased a domain for me. He
Mhm.
had cards made up for me. And I was like, I have to put my story out there now. I have to. And I wasn't really ready. And he believed in me. And I put it out there and it was scary. And then it came down to my purpose again because I was like, well, having this on my website, my whole story, and that I'm still terrified at the time of public speaking and everything else. If I go to get a job and they Google me and they're going to see I'm terrified of public speaking, they're not going to want to hire me.
Right? I was concerned about that too. I mean, some of the stuff I write about in my blog, I'm like, I don't want to put my name on it because if I'm going to get a job and they read that, they're going to think I'm crazy sometime, you know?
The only advantage that I have with this is because I work in the psychology field.
Right?
I really think that is the reason why. And I wanted to work so badly. There's the Anxiety Disorder Center, the Institute of Living in Hartford, Connecticut. That's a mouthful. It is the greatest place ever. And I wanted that job so bad for so long. I had a publication in Psychology Today. A social anxiety author interviewed me, and I put everything out there. And at the job interview, I put that down on the table. I was like, this is why I want to work here. This is how serious I am about this. And I got it.
Wow.
And they do remarkable treatment there for anyone looking for any kind of anxiety disorder. They use CBT. But I was that determined and I actually used it to my advantage.
Yeah.
It was a risk. It was a risk though.
It is. And, it's been a big risk for me too, but I think it's that I've made it something positive too, because there've been so many people that have come to me and said, I feel the same way. And I'm so glad that you're sharing what you're sharing. And it's turning into a business for me. Something that just started as a hobby on Instagram has really been incredibly life-changing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing to me because it started with like a New Year's resolution at the beginning of this year that, okay, I'm going to sit down and write a blog post every single week. And I know the first one is going to be terrible and awful because I'm really not that great of a writer. I was always better at math when I was in school. So I'm like, I have 3 different apps that check spelling and grammar. And I still miss some things sometimes. And I get really nervous when people go and they say, oh, I went back and read some of your old stuff. I'm like, oh, please don't do that. It's not that good. The newer stuff is better. But, I knew it was going to be terrible in the beginning because I didn't have any practice. I hadn't really done it before. But just doing it every single week, I think it gets a lot better, and it's still kind of terrifying, but it's easier to hit the publish button. It's easier to put yourself out there the more that you do it.
Exactly. It gets easier. And maintaining it instead of being sporadic. If you have a system, it's once a week that you're doing it, sticking to that, it makes it a lot easier. Say, rather someone post something than wait 6 months and then you go through the whole nerve-wracking process again.
Yeah, and I think that's part of it that helped me too, was saying, okay, I'm going to do this once a week. And I made, this schedule in my head that I'm like, okay, every single Monday I'm going to post something. And sometimes, it's 9:00 at night on Monday. And I'm like, okay, I have to get with it because it's Monday. And I said that I was going to post something on Monday. So I have to figure it out pretty quick here.
Mm-hmm. That's the best way to keep yourself accountable.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, I think that was everything that I had. Do you have anything else that you want to share or that you think is important?
I wasn't expecting this to keep focusing back on purpose. And it's just amazing how many of the topics went back to purpose. And I just think that, putting yourself out there, being real, being authentic, sharing your story, that's the biggest thing that you can do, especially as a business owner. Everyone wants to know a story.
Yes, and everyone wants somebody that they can relate to too. So when you find your purpose, you have this whole other drive to do the things that you're doing, to write blog posts, to put yourself in front of a video camera, to, even record a podcast and interview people like what I'm doing. It's still something that I'm learning. But it's a whole lot different when there are people that are telling you how much it means to them. And I mean, it makes you open up even more, having that purpose. And yeah, once you find that, once you figure out what you're supposed to do, it's this incredibly amazing, amazing thing.
hmm The number one fear is of public speaking. And this kind of goes back to, sharing your story and being worried about the reactions. And I find it so like incredible that people are so afraid to admit that they have the fear of public speaking. It's so ironic because it is the number one fear, but there's such a big stigma related to it.
Yeah, yeah.
And then people actually share their story. I mean, it affects so many people, but again, it comes down to, having the courage to persist beyond your fear with it.
Right.
I just get really worked up about that because it is the number one fear. And it's like, why can't we just talk about it? Why can't we tell our coworkers?
The other thing too that I don't understand about that is, why is there a stigma around it? Why do people feel like it makes you less of a person if you don't like standing up in front of people and talking?
Mm-hmm.
You
Yep.
know?
But they don't mind sharing that their number one phobia is a spider.
Right.
It,
Right.
it doesn't make sense to me at all.
Yeah. Yep.
uh, so with the public speaking aspect, I just would like to share briefly what changed my life around entirely. 9 years ago already, September, yep, 9 years ago, I attended a workshop called Getting Over Stage Fright here in Connecticut. And the woman had written 2 books on the topic of public speaking and performing anxiety. And then I was sharing about my social anxiety and what I do. And we ended up collaborating, and she trained me to do the workshop. That workshop changed my life. It just introduced a whole new perspective. Being in a small, intimate group like that, I mean, people are flying across the country and not even telling their spouses what they're really there for. Like, it's more of a Toastmasters presentation skills type of thing, when it's strictly on the fear of public speaking and performing. And having that whole experience completely changed my life. That's when I started Toastmasters in a new club. I did my first speech within like 2 or 3 weeks, and it really changed my life. And it's such an honor for me to facilitate that workshop now. And it's 16 hours intensive weekend, and there's coaching, hands-on coaching before and after each exercise. It was just life changing, and it's really hard to find anything like that.
That sounds amazing. That sounds like something I need to go to, honestly.
It changed me. And every single weekend when I leave on a Sunday night, I am on a natural high for a week. And then everyone's emailing all their experiences and how they're stepping up and saying yes to things. It's definitely one of my biggest passions, and I'm very fortunate. And the coaching as well. I just love to see progress.
So you do individual coaching for people who have anxiety?
Yes, individual coaching, online, on the phone, whichever, in person if close enough. And I focus on the cognitive behavioral side of it, where identifying you're having these automatic negative thoughts that have been happening forever because you don't know the difference, catching them, turning them neutral, and then eventually positive. And I combine it with what's called cognitive distortions, which everyone has that. It's not just anxiety. And there are things like all or nothing kind of thinking or mind reading what somebody else is thinking of you. And then I have an Excel sheet that matches up the thoughts with the distortions to find a pattern. And then you also analyze that thought and make it like, what is the most realistic outcome rather than predicting the worst.
Wow. That
And that helped me a lot when I was in my therapy and doing my own work on it.
Yeah, it takes a lot of work to, when you're so used to jumping to worst case scenario, which is kind of, what anxiety is. It takes a lot of work to be able to start to change that.
Mm-hmm. And one of the best things that I like to have my clients ask themselves, I mean, normally I'll do it a couple times, but going into a situation where they are going to be public speaking, like, what is the worst case scenario? What is the best case scenario? And then what is the most realistic scenario? And the realistic is like, well, I've done it before, I can do it again. Or no, not everybody's going to really be scrutinizing me and looking for signs of anxiety. It really changes. And like the best, you don't think about, oh, what is the best outcome that could be? What if I don't experience nearly as much anxiety as I think I will? What if I actually enjoy it a little bit?
Yes.
So yeah, I just like to, but it really does shift the perspective though when you go through that, and then like what realistically is going to happen. I think that calms the anxiety a lot.
Yeah, it does for sure. And I think part of that too is having a little bit of experience, so you can say, okay, what happened last time? That's probably more realistic than all these scenarios that I'm making up in my head.
Exactly.
And even if you can watch somebody else, maybe there's somebody else in front of you, and say, what happened to them? Maybe I'm not going to be the most dynamic speaker like they are, but look at how the audience responds and see, half of them probably aren't even paying attention, like we talked about before.
Mm-hmm. They're not paying attention. And honestly, the goal is just for you to get up there and face your fear. You're not going to turn into this dynamic speaker. You don't need to compete with anyone. And shifting that perspective to, I have to impress everyone and blow them away. That's just not realistic in the beginning, unless you're really working and doing Toastmaster speeches or something like that. I mean, really, like giving yourself so much credit. That's number one. Credit for saying yes. Credit for actually getting up there. Credit for not running away. People do flee the situations. I mean,
right.
That's what the focus should be in the beginning. And do you really want to be a dynamic speaker? And as an INFJ, do you really want to be a speaker? Or you feel like you're supposed to be a really good speaker?
Right.
A little bit of a rant there, but it's really thinking about it. Like, what do you really want? Does it really matter that much to you? Or is just all this years of conditioning of putting all this pressure on yourself? Yeah. Instead, make your anxiety manageable and then go from there. If you like it, pursue it. If you don't, that's fine.
Yes, I feel like there's such this huge unlearning process that we have to go through because, we're taught from such a young age that you need to be extroverted, and there's something wrong with you if you don't want to be around a lot of people. There's something wrong with you if you don't want to stand up in front of people and talk, or if you don't want to sit at a lunch table with a bunch of strangers. So it's that unlearning process of, you don't have to be that. You don't have to be the most dynamic speaker. You can just be a speaker, and that's okay. You can just be average as far as, what you're saying. And I mean, if it's a work presentation, it's probably not going to be something that you need to be dynamic about anyway. It's probably boring and people are just stuck there listening to you.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the ability to do it, to put yourself out there. That's the same process that I went through, when I started writing my blog. It's just, okay, do it. It's going to be terrible, but that's okay. Accept that the first time is going to be terrible and do it anyway. And then the next time is going to be better. And the next time is going to be better than that. Mm-hmm. But you can't get to the ones that are better until you deal with the first one that's terrible.
Exactly. And the expectations are completely unnecessary. And that's what derails the whole experience. And then the beat up cycle, when if you just go in and say, I just want to do this, I want to face my fear, maybe I'll feel a little less anxious. Maybe it'll go better than I planned. That's it.
For sure. And It's a whole new way of looking at it, honestly. And I think that sometimes too we put those expectations on ourselves without even recognizing that's what we're doing, and that's what makes us, that's what makes it so bad.
Yep, and that relates to catching those automatic negative thoughts too, to really become so much more aware.
Awesome. So tell us where we can find you.
My website is sociallyspeakingplus.com. Instagram, anxiety coach Marla. Facebook, it's probably just easier to follow my regular profile. My full name, Marla Genova, and I have a business one, Marla Genova, Socially Speaking. And then on LinkedIn, just my name.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you so very much for having me. I'm completely honored. I'm so happy I found you and I'm following you, and I can't wait to hear more podcasts and everything else that you're doing.
I hope you enjoyed that interview as much as I did. I have dealt with anxiety for my whole life, though I was only diagnosed with an anxiety disorder about 5 years ago. I know that everyone deals with anxiety in a different way. Some people try to ignore it, some people try to push through it, some people even deny that they have it sometimes. Whatever works for you, I encourage you to lean into that. Life is way too short to let anxiety take over your life. Another thing that I wanted to say is don't let anyone take it away from you. So many people want to say that anxiety is not that bad, or they want to tell you to stop worrying or stop being so dramatic. But the thing is, they can't tell you how to feel. They don't know how you feel, especially if they have never experienced anxiety before. You know what you are feeling, and I'm sure that if you're like me, if you could make it stop, you would. So don't let anyone take it away from you. Don't let anyone discount how you are feeling. All right, so we're going to do a segment that we call Ask Sarah. And the question this week comes from Anna. She says, I want to start an Instagram account like yours, but I'm worried about potential negative comments. How do you handle negative comments on your account? Hey Anna, I am so glad that you want to start an Instagram account. I absolutely love my Instagram account. I love connecting with other INFJs. I love the community that we've created. And there are so many people who message me and say things like, I'm so glad that you started this account. It helps me so much. And I really like, connecting with other people. But every once in a while, there are a few people who will say something negative. And as much as I hate it, it does happen from time to time. So the way that I usually deal with them, I take a minute to consider their comment. If it's just nasty for the point of being nasty, I'll delete it right away. And I usually block the person who wrote it because my thought process is if they wrote one nasty comment, they're going to write another one. So I just go ahead and block them right away. If it's something that maybe isn't nasty, it just kind of hits me the wrong way, then I might take a little bit of time to consider it and maybe think about it for a day and see if, in 24 hours, I still feel the same way about it. And if I do, then I'll do the same thing. I'll go ahead and block them and delete the comment. The way that I look at it is that life is way too short to be worried about other people's negativity. There are so many accounts on Instagram that people can find something to be positive about. We don't need the negativity. And I think about not only myself, but I think about all of the other people who are going to read it. I really hope that everyone who follows me reads all the comments. And if you do, I appreciate you because I'll be honest, there's a lot of comments and I don't really have time to read them all. I do try to read them though from time to time. But I know that there are some people who do read them, and I don't want people in my community to read all of the negativity because I know that as INFJs, we have a tendency to just soak all of it in, soak all of other people's emotions and feelings up and take them on as our own. And I don't want anybody doing that with negativity on my page. And the way that I look at it, when you run an account, you're the expert on that. topic. You're the one who's in control of it. So if there is negativity on there, it's up to you to control it, to police it, and to get rid of it. Because, you don't want all of your followers to be soaking all of that up. So that's what I do. That's the best advice that I can give you, is to just get rid of it and to get rid of the people who bring it, so that you don't have to worry about it and the people who follow you don't have to worry about it either. I hope this helps, and good luck with your account. Let me know what it is. I would love to follow you. All right, I think that's all we have for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. Please make sure that you subscribe wherever you're listening at, and we'll see you again next week.